Now, let's get to our first guest, Georgia Congressman Austin Scott. Congressman, you drew the short straw today, buddy. I'm sorry about that. Congressman McConnell and McCarthy's record at standing against the harm being dished out by Democrats, it's pretty clear, Congressman. But the GOP overwhelmingly voted to keep them in leadership roles, along with virtually the same Democrats in charge as well. Isn't that the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result, Congressman?
Well, I think you're right about the definition of insanity, and I certainly think there's a lot that we need to do better for conservatives, like pushing decisions back to the state and local level. You know, we've got a 10th Amendment in the Constitution, and we need to remember that when we go to writing the budget and other things. I will tell you, now I'm a supporter of Kevin McCarthy, so I heard your comments, and I was, smiling as you were saying them, but I think Kevin deserves a chance. And so if you go back a few years with my track record, I actually seconded the nomination of Raul Labrador, one of the founding members of the Freedom Caucus, against Kevin McCarthy when we had our leadership races. But Kevin was not the one that caused the problems when we had the supermajority that we had, or significant majority that we had when I came in 2011. It was John Boehner, candidly, that wouldn't allow the conservatives to push forward a conservative agenda. And so this is the first opportunity Kevin McCarthy had to lead. I think he deserves a chance to lead. And before we condemn him for something that other people have done, let's give Kevin a chance.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, I think that's fair, but I will just ask you this, Congressman, because in the middle of the midterm elections, Mr. McCarthy was wandering around various media, basically saying, we are not interested in impeaching Joe Biden, even though we've got Joe Biden on videotape doing exactly, admitting that he did what Donald Trump was impeached for, which is withholding congressionally approved money from Ukraine on the basis of a quid pro quo. He wanted a prosecutor fired in Ukraine. So he withheld the money, which is against the law from what we're told. And that's what got President Trump impeached. But Mr. McCarthy was sending the message that Republicans are not interested in holding the Democrats to the same standard that Democrats held Republicans to. Do you think that's a winning message, sir?
I think we believe in the Constitution, and they don't. Donald Trump should have never been impeached. And the fact that they unconstitutionally impeached Donald Trump doesn't mean that we should take the same path that Democrats do. And so I think the impeachment of Donald Trump was wrong, and I'm not in favor of impeaching Joe Biden without an impeachable offense. And an impeachable offense would go before a committee, and there would be hearings where both sides would be able to make their case. And I think it's irresponsible to talk about impeaching the President of the United States, regardless of which party it is, without having those hearings and presenting the evidence. Now, the Democrats operate that way. I think it's important that we as Republicans, Chris, don't operate that way.
Well, I think that's a fair analysis. But again, we've got Mr. Biden on tape saying that he withheld over $1 billion unless a prosecutor was fired in Ukraine. Do you think that's a permissible or a non-impeachable offense, just in looking at it as his admission on tape?
If President Biden did what he said he did, and he was vice president at the time, then I think that is probably an impeachable offense. But before we say we're going to impeach somebody, I do think that person is entitled to the hearings and the opportunity to defend themselves. If he withheld money like that, and who knows if he did or didn't do what he said he was going to do, it is Joe Biden after all, then I think that is potentially an impeachable offense. But I do believe that it needs to go before our committees. And if you have Jim Jordan chairing the committee, and I would remind you, it's Kevin McCarthy that made Jim Jordan the leader of the Judiciary Committee, then I feel pretty good that we're going to get to the truth. And that's the key to resolving the issues in this country, is the truth.
Well, no, I'm right there with you, Congressman. And I would just say that it was probably premature to take impeachment of Mayorkas or of Joe Biden off the table before we had hearings and discovery and evidence. I would have much preferred the leader of the Republicans to say, hey, you know what, we'll see where the evidence leads us, and then left it at that. But that wasn't the message coming into the midterms. And I think it cost the Republicans a lot of, Well, I think it cost the Republicans a lot of votes there, Congressman.
If there is an impeachable offense, then I expect that you would see action taken. But what we're not going to do is conduct ourselves the way the Democrats did, where they made a mockery of our Constitution and our former president and the way things are supposed to be done in Washington, D.C.
Okay. In your state, let's pivot to the Herschel Walker-Raphael Warnock Senate race. It's headed for a runoff, as you know, on the 6th. Warnock is suing the state of Georgia to change the start date of early voting, essentially trying to change the rules in the middle of the game. That's what the other side does. You know, in 2020, when a Democrat by the name of Stacey Abrams made similar demands, your GOP governor in that state and Secretary of State bent over backwards to accommodate Stacey Abrams. Do you think they're going to do that again to help Raphael Warnock out?
Well, it was more the Secretary of State that did things than it was our governor at the time. Our Secretary of State did did join into an agreement with them to not do the signature match versus the database. I do think that if you want to take Trump out of the equation, I honestly believe that David Perdue would be in the U.S. Senate right now. That would certainly make a big difference in what has happened over the last 2 years if Raffensperger had not agreed to what he did. But I'm disappointed that there are lawsuits going on about the elections in Georgia. If you remember, back a couple of years ago, they were talking about Jim Crow this and Jim Crow that and all of these other accusations about the election law. We had a good election in the state of Georgia. A lot of ballots were cast. In fact, it was a larger election than we have had with regard to the early vote, which is where the complaints were about the original, the voting bill, the SB 202. Than we've had in the history of the off-cycle elections, meaning the non-presidential elections. So we had a great election. We got our ballots counted that night. We have a runoff for the U.S. Senate. That we have an election where Republicans won every other seat on the statewide ballots, and we won a majority in the House and the Senate. And so there haven't been any complaints about problems with the elections in Georgia, and just think about the complaints that were made prior to us actually having the election, where Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines and Major League Baseball and the President of the United States and Stacey Abrams played a big part in getting the MLB to move the All-Star game out of Georgia. I mean, think about all of the accusations that were made before the election. We haven't had any problems. Now we just got to go win the Senate seat and get Herschel across the finish line and sworn in as a U.S. Senator, so that when it comes to judicial nominees and the whatever they call that thing they have over there, the 60-vote rule in the Senate, that we don't give the Democrats the ability to run roughshod over the American citizens any more than they already have. The filibuster rule. I'm sorry.
Fair enough. And all those entities you mentioned, Congressman, owe the state of Georgia a big apology, from Biden to Major League Baseball to Stacey Abrams, because as you rightly point out, election integrity laws were passed. Yeah. You guys had passed election integrity laws there, and it was record turnout, so it didn't diminish at all the response of voters out there. It actually got to record-breaking levels. And Joe Biden and all those woke companies owe the state of Georgia a big apology. Congressman,
I agree.
Spirited discussion, sir. I appreciate you taking the slings and arrows. I appreciate it.